Welcome to the Thriving in Higher Education podcast, hosted by Dr. Yvette Myrick and Dr. Estelle Young.
Well, welcome. Hi, so glad to have you. This is the Thriving in Higher Education podcast. We're just starting off. We're so excited to come together. Thank you for being part of our podcast. My name is Dr. Yvette Myrick, but I just go by Yvette, and I am here with.
My name is Dr. Estelle Young, and I just go by Estelle.
So we just wanted to take this episode to have you all hopefully get to know us a little bit better. So hopefully we will be around each other for a very long time. And just to share a little background about our journey and how we got here. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, and I live right now in Colorado. But when I met Estelle, we were both working at a college in Maryland. So originally I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Have not always lived there. Lived in California, North Carolina, like I said, Maryland, now Colorado. But started off in Maryland and went to high school there. Went on to get my bachelor's degree in business administration at the University of Baltimore. And then I just knew that, oh my goodness, as much as I love business, business was my major in high school. Went to Western High School. I'll put that out there. I went to Western High School, an all-female academic high school in Baltimore. I wanted to really go into education. So right after I graduated and got my bachelor's degree from the University of Baltimore, I went right back to college to work on my master's degree in adult education. And I always knew that I wanted to work with adults because that communication and that connection with adults and that feedback you can get with adults. So within probably a few months, I enrolled at Coppin State University, HBCU in Maryland, enrolled there, and I got my master's degree in adult and continuing education. And so then for 10 years, for quite a while, worked in different areas of higher education and worked as a full-time professor at a college in Maryland, and decided after a number of years that I wanted to go back. And actually a colleague of mine, she encouraged me to go back to get my doctorate degree. And I alternate sometimes between working in faculty and working in administration positions in my career. So I decided to enroll in the George Washington University, and I got my doctorate degree in education and higher education administration. So when people see us sometimes, they see who we are today, but they don't always know your journey to get there, your ups and downs and your trials and tribulations and different careers and different states and different locations. But we always end up, hopefully, at a place that we enjoy and that we love doing what we are doing in our careers. So that's just a little bit about my bio and who I am. And I really look forward to getting to know everyone else, your background as we do this podcast. Hopefully we will get to learn more about you as well.
That is just so wonderful. So this is my dear friend, Yvette Myrick, and I've known her for 15 years and just always kind of amazed to learn new things about her, and I always do. So I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin, and that's a very progressive city and public service oriented. So I always wanted to go into a career in public service, but I really never knew where I belonged. But I first found out that it was in higher education because I was working in for this city, District of Columbia government, and I got an opportunity, just landed in my lap to be an adjunct at the University of the District of Columbia. And I really felt like I had found my home in teaching as an adjunct. I just loved it. So just like Yvette, I went back to school and I got my doctorate and I started to teach again, and taught at both Bowie State University and Morgan State University in the greater Baltimore area, two HBCUs. Amazing experience. Got to be a faculty member, and I got to advise some student groups. I got to participate in some at Morgan in a national initiative on minority student retention. And so I got kind of obsessed by retention and went to work for a local community college that was there also. Um, Went to work for a local community college, and there I got to work on retention and got a chance to learn grant writing, since retention programs at that community college were sometimes funded through grant funding. So I got grant experience writing with people who had tons of grant experience. So I learned the tricks of the trade. And then I left the community college, and now I volunteer for the Greater Baltimore Urban League doing college access work. And I write grants for small colleges all across the country who are, wanting to underwrite retention initiatives, and all federal grants. So have been involved in higher education for 30 years in one way or the other, but kind of all over the place in terms of the way in which I've been involved in higher education. So thanks. So that's my story. That so I'm wondering if we could turn to talking about what our goals are for the for this podcast. Yvette, what are your goals?
Sure. And just what Estelle was saying, we just have so much wealth of knowledge. And as she mentioned, about 30 years, and I'm probably close to that as well. Well, my master's was back in 1993, so, and started working in that field before that time. So we just love what we do and the passion behind it. So to answer Estelle's question about the goals, it just goes back to everything that we worked on and why we feel so passionate. We started together and collaborate, and that come up a little bit more in our podcast, our collaborations. But we started the blog that we collaborated on together. And from the blog, our blog was Thriving in Higher Education Careers. We went on to write a book together, write a book about thriving in higher education careers. And in the book, we talk about our goals. Why did we decide to take the blog to the book, and now we're doing a podcast? Why did we decide to write a book, and why did we decide to do the blog? And that goes tied to closely to our goals for the podcast. So for me, the goal for me of this podcast is really to take all our knowledge, experience, and education, everything we learned along the way, and sort of share that with others. And in education, we're like the facilitator. It comes back to us. So your feedback and your input and things you share with us, we learn too. We always talk about lifelong learners. So my goal is to share what I know, and maybe that can help somebody else along the way. So maybe they don't repeat the mistakes that I did, or maybe it can help them in their careers, their choices, and we're going to cover so many topics during a podcast and all the different episodes that we're going to have. So maybe that could be helpful to someone else. So my goal is to share my lived experiences, and hopefully that can help other people as well. So that's my goal, is to make a contribution to the field, help others, but for me as well, to learn from other people, the viewers and everyone else that communicate with us. Would love to learn from you all as well. So Estelle, what about your goals?
Yeah, so I am incredibly excited about this podcast because what we're trying to do is to offer some simple strategies that can allow higher education professionals to reignite the passion and the purpose that led them to a career in higher education in the first place. I don't know anyone in higher education. I don't know a single person who didn't enter the field full of hope and lofty aspirations about, did they want to do teaching and develop students who were going to be great professionals and great minds? Did they want to contribute to knowledge? Did they want to contribute to student development? On and on, all of these lofty ideals. is why people enter. But sometimes in higher education in particular, we have a situation happen that gets us discouraged or gets us derailed, and we can forget the purpose for which we came. So our job, our goal for this podcast is to kind of clear the underbrush, clear it away, to expose and re-expose the passion and purpose which brought you to higher education. So it almost makes me cry. I am so excited to be a part of this podcast, and I'm so very grateful to have Yvette as my co-author.
Well, thank you, Estelle, and I'm just blessed to have you. You've been so instrumental into where I am today in my career. And if we can help anyone else, even one or two, or who knows how many people along their path, I think that'd be great. And you just reminded me when you said that passion, the importance of higher education. I just remember growing up in Baltimore, and of course, my sisters and I were all born in the projects in Baltimore. And had it not been for education and higher education, I don't know where I would have been without that, without the importance of realizing higher education and what it can mean and the influence it can have on the person and then in the community. And I'm just so blessed to be part of that, to help others along the way. And I really do think, as you said, that passion of helping others, because we realize the value of higher education and what a difference it can make in someone's life and the difference it can make in the community. So thank you for reminding us about that passion and why we do this. So thank you so much. I just want to talk a little bit about the structure. This is what Stella and I, we are new to this podcast. So this is the structure that we came up with, and hey, it may change. I always believe in looking at something and tweaking it along the way. It may change as viewers say, hey, why don't you talk about this topic, or why don't you cover this? But for now, I just want to just go over some things that we were thinking about for each episode that we do. We have a lot of topics that we cover in our book, and we're going to look at some of the topics there in our book and talk about those topics, and then bring on somebody who embodies that topic, their knowledge, and share that. Because, Estelle and I, we're great friends, but you probably don't want to just see us every episode, the two of us. So we're going to bring on guests, and we're going to interview those guests. And those guests are related to the topic that we're going to talk about. And they can share their knowledge and experience and things like that with you all as the viewers. And then after we do the interviews, we also have some tips that we want to share. I believe in sharing suggestions and tips and things that could help to make your life better or your institution and things like that. These are no cost, effective tips that you can implement right away. So we want to include that as well. And then we will always tell you, about our upcoming topics and things of interest. So those are the things as far as the structure for right now. We're going to have some great guests coming up for you, and we'll talk about that in another minute or two. But then we also want to leave you with some tips and suggestions that will make it very meaningful for you to implement as well.
That's great. So, Yvette, do you have a favorite interview that's coming up?
Well, I do enjoy all our interviews as well. It's like almost asking somebody who's your favorite child and your mother or father, But I enjoy all our spotlight interviews that we did in our book. I guess one of the ones that I would say to stand out because it's so relevant today is the interview that we did about diversity, and that's the one with Lisbeth Jacobs. And we'll talk a little bit about her later on. But that was the one that I thought stood out because diversity in higher education is so important. So I love all of them, but that's one because it's so relevant that I thought, well, this is just timeless that we can use. And what about you? Do you have one?
Well, I'm just going to back out and just say I cannot choose. So it's basically every interview is my favorite interview. But what happens with those interviews is they're ordinary people that have a particular mastery of something in higher education to really keep you charged up and focused. So they're going to share their not secrets, but they're going to share their strategies with us. And so that's my favorite part, is just hearing all the different strategies. So really, 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 we're so excited to start this podcast. We'll be starting next week at this time, and we'll be starting with her favorite interviewee, Elizabeth Jacobs, and she's going to be talking about the topic of diversity, and she has a lot to say. She's been kind of as a person, she's been working in the area ever since she was in her teens, and as an academician is working from an academic perspective on focused on diversity. So she has a lot to say, a lot to share, and interesting. So our book, Yvette interviewed her for the book, for the original book, but then we're offering at the podcast, it's a totally different interview. So you can get, she has a lot to say, so you can get two different perspectives by looking at the two different things. And I am, just thrilled that you're here for this podcast, and looking forward to it as we move on to the next episode. So thank you so much, and I believe in you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Estelle, and I believe in you too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Higher Education Podcast. Be sure to grab a Higher Education journal to respond and reflect on the ideas presented in the future episodes. If you would like more discussions like these, you can take a look at the book Thriving in Higher Education Careers, written by Dr. A. Yvette Myrick and Estelle Young. You can purchase this book on Amazon.com. As always, if you have any other topics you would like us to discuss, feel free to shoot us an email at thrivinginhigheredpodcast@gmail.com. That's thrivinginhigheredpodcast@gmail.com.